What is going on, everybody, and welcome to the first official episode of my new podcast, the Let's Talk Draft podcast. This is where we're going to be talking about the NFL draft mostly all the time. I'm still your same host here on this channel, Alec Elijah, of course, just with the new name that's a bit more proper for, what we talk about, a majority on this channel, really. Of course, we're still going to have our NFL and other college football content as well, but I just kind of felt it was time to really hone in on the NFL draft and everything that I really like to cover, especially with the 2023 draft, slowly creeping up and approaching us. I thought, what a better time than now. So be sure to hit that like and subscribe button if you are new. If you're returning, thank you so much. I always appreciate you guys viewing me. Throw a notification bell so you don't miss a video, from here on out, because I'm going to be coming and firing off with a lot of these top 10 lists, early top 10 lists for the 2023 NFL Draft prospects. On today's episode, we'll be getting into my current top 10 college football cornerbacks that are eligible for the 2023 draft this season. Currently, this is based off tape prior, to this season, as well as, the 7 weeks of play that we've already seen. So, there's a lot to go based off of. Of course, there's going to be prospects that are going to, rise up on this list, assuming that everybody exceeds their gameplay from now. Of course, like I said, this is a very early top 10 list, so we are going to have another one later on in the season, a lot closer to draft time for sure. Starting off at number 1, let's talk about Cam Smith from South Carolina. He's a 6 foot, 188-pound cornerback, and I think he is the CB1 of this class. Folks can debate with themselves all they want between who the CB1 really is in this class, but I've said it, prior to this season even starting. I like Cam Smith's game, and I think he's going to be the one out of this draft class. He can play extremely well in any defensive scheme, so any team that drafts him is really, they're not going to have to be worried about slotting him at CB2, CB1 because he fits any role. He's one of the most physical corners in this draft class, and he's someone that I would really consider a seatbelt corner. And for those of you that don't know what a seatbelt corner means, that means this guy can strap up. He can absolutely make a wide receiver's day extremely long. He's the best man coverage corner in this draft, and he can also excel in zone coverage too. He doesn't shy away from contact, which I know coaches are going to love. He can at times be a little too aggressive and misses, tackles here and there, but to me, that's honestly the easiest thing to clean up at the next level. Moving on to the SEC's second and potential cornerback one, I have Kelee Ringo from Georgia. He's a 6'2", 205-pound corner, and he's probably the only other cornerback in this draft class that I would really consider a pure CB1, at least going into the NFL. And what I love about Ringo's game, man, is he has the ability to play on the outside and inside at the nickel position, and he's 6'2". He can lock any size wide receiver down, and he has the hips and solid speed to keep up with really any of them in stride. He's another corner in this draft class that you can really trust on an island, which I really like. And he's proven time and time again, just how hard it is to score on him. If we just see what he did against Tennessee with Hyatt, he made his day long for sure. I think he's elite in zone coverage, and he's extremely dependable. When Madden coverage is called upon because of his 6'2" frame, you can leave Ringo on any team's wide receiver one throughout the ballgame, and he will definitely disrupt an offensive coordinator's game plan. That's going to be something that NFL coaches are going to love from Ringo. He's only a sophomore, so he doesn't necessarily have to declare this season, but he does have the goods to go top 25 for sure in this draft class without a doubt. Now, let's get into the Pac-12 as a bunch that I, mentioned. Let's start off with the first and best cornerback, I think, right now out of the Pac-12, and that's going to be Clark Phillips III out of Utah, 5'10", 185 pounds. Every year we try to find that guy that possesses that twitch in his game, that guy that can just separate himself from other corners because of that one gear that they can just kick into. And I think this year's draft class, that guy is going to be Utah's Clark Phillips III for sure. He can very well be one of the top 3 fastest corners in this draft with, that's going to make him an intriguing prospect off the rip. While he may be regarded as undersized because, like I mentioned, he's 5'10", because of his speed and, he's able to cover a lot of ground in zone coverage, I think he's going to be able to, be extremely successful in the NFL despite people, making comments on his height. Even if it is a problem, I think, Clark Phillips III can be one of those guys that switches over to the nickel position full-time, maybe even a full-time slot corner, which, guys are getting paid in the NFL. If we just take a look at last year's draft, we had Trent McDuffie, perfect nickel corner, and he's going to make tons of money. He's already doing very well with the Chiefs. If he puts on weight, I think he can be a lot more disruptive on the line of scrimmage. The kid is extremely physical when given the chance to, but, for now, zone coverage is definitely his bread and butter, and he's shown it time and time again with his time at Utah. He's currently sitting this season with 2 pick sixes and 5 interceptions so far, so he's definitely got the goods for teams to, be opening up their eyes and taking a look at Clark Phillips III. Now, the man with the coolest name on this list and these skills to match, Caillou Blue Kelly from the Stanford Cardinals, stands at 6'1", 190 pounds, and he is one of the more underrated cornerbacks in this draft class. He's excellent in zone and man coverage, but I think his tackling is going to be what sets him apart from all the other guys in this draft class. Unlike a lot of the corners ahead of him, Kelly understands how to break down a running back, break down a wide receiver, and he doesn't overshoot his tackles, and he doesn't, he's not excessively aggressive. Kelly uses his big frame to size up a lot of his opponents, whether it be in the air or making a tackle on the ball carrier. I think he's excellent when he has to take on some of these bigger wide receivers or tight ends that he's faced already this season and last. So he's definitely got some great tape going into this year's draft. He's got the skills to become a CB1 at some point in the NFL. However, I think right now he's going to be the perfect CB2 for a lot of teams, that have an opening right away. And he's also going to make a huge impact on the special teams for sure. Now, the Oregon Ducks have themselves a stud at cornerback, Christian Gonzalez, standing at 6'2", 200 pounds. Gonzalez was a standout corner at Colorado prior to coming over to the Oregon Ducks. He spent 2 seasons over as a Buffalo. He had 78 tackles total. He's excellent in man coverage, being very physical. He jams up a lot of his opponents at the line of scrimmage, and he puts emphasis into his hits when he's going at a lot of these ball carriers. He made his mark as one of the nation's best tackling corners, which gave him the opportunity and, a bigger presence, really, with the Oregon Ducks. Now, as a Duck, I feel like his stock has definitely increased, and his name has been rising up draft boards, as weeks go by. Some analysts already have them in their top 5 in this draft, maybe even in their top 3. For now, he's definitely going to stay at CB5 for me, but there's still plenty of time for him to really rise up through the rankings. And, as the season goes on, he can definitely potentially crack my top 3. There's a few question marks regarding his field vision just because there's been several instances where wide receivers have, mossed him or found big gains against him. But I feel like with more work on his technique and his hips, I feel like that problem can be resolved very easily, and we can see Christian Gonzalez be an absolute stud in the NFL. Now let's talk about my diamond in the rough player for cornerbacks. Last year, it was Tariq Woolen out of UTSA. I was super big on Tariq. This year, it's going to be DeJordan Strong from the Coastal Carolina Chanticleers. He's standing at 5'11", 175 pounds, and he is the Sun Belt's hidden gem. He's been one of my favorite cornerbacks for the past 2 seasons now, and he has the goods to start in the NFL at slot or nickel position. He's got a total feel for the game, being able to force turnovers, whether it be an interception or even punching the ball out, forcing a fumble. Strong can play both man and zone coverage with no problems whatsoever, and if necessary, he can go from the slot to the outside. However, I think if he completely really wants to flourish in the NFL, he can fall onto a team that really desperately needs a slot corner or a nickel position, and they can just slide him in right away. As I mentioned earlier, like the situation with McDuffie in Kansas City. I would definitely classify, Strong with a disruptor trait just because he can be an offensive coordinator's worst nightmare. We've seen it time and time again for those of you that tune into the Sun Belt games. But the way he flies around the field and makes stops against the pass and run, it's absolutely amazing. And he's got the tangibles to be in the NFL. I don't see why he wouldn't be a top 10 corner, on anybody else's lists. I can't wait to see what he does in the league for sure. And he might be one of those guys that as, the season goes on, he rises up and cracks my top 5 despite being in the Sun Belt Division and on the Coastal Carolina Chanticleers. Moving on to my CB7 on the list, we have Tony Grimes from the North Carolina Tar Heels, 6 foot, 197 pounds, and he's another cornerback that I easily had in my top 10 last year. I mean, I'm glad that he didn't go to the draft last year just because I felt like he definitely needed a little bit more time just to sharpen up his game, and he's done that this season for sure. His bread and butter within his traits are going to be his length and speed, and he knows how to use both of them extremely well. He has a track and field background, so we can see why he's extremely quick, and it's rare to see Grimes get burnt in coverage. I mean, when he does, he has plenty of speed to track down receivers and make up for that ground that he's lost, and he can also make a stop. His focal point is going to be zone coverage where, he can disrupt passes and cause wrinkles in an offensive coordinator's play calling. I mean, while he isn't as physical as some of the other corners in this draft, he still has plenty of upside in zone-heavy schemes, and he can make a big impact on special teams for sure right away. Now, let's get into a name that some of you might recognize from Last Chance U, Rajon Wright from Oregon State. He's a 6'2", 200-pound corner, and I have been a fan of his since Last Chance U. I'm going to be quite honest. Wright has been a corner that I just think he can flat out play in the league. I believe he can be a starter quarterback in the NFL after a year of studying and sharpening his tools. Maybe he plays CB2, CB3 his first season, but I think after that, this guy can be an absolute stud. He's a lengthy cornerback who loves hitting, and he loves getting physical at the line of scrimmage with his opponents. I mean, at the line, he's got a solid press technique and utilizes his long frame well to jam up opponents, disrupting their routes very easily. He's definitely one of those players that can slip through the cracks in this draft, as I already seen with his brother, but I believe he's another cornerback gem from the Pac-12, and I think he can be, one of those guys that after a year or two, we just completely see him dominate the league. Now, getting into one of the draft risers in this draft class, from the Bayou, we have Sevyn Banks, an LSU Tiger, 6'2", 205 pounds, and he's been one of my personal favorites to watch in the SSC. He transferred over from Ohio State to LSU, being a full-time starter on the Tigers defense, and Banks has shown the capabilities of starting at the next level. Banks utilizes his long arms to really disrupt passes and be a menace in the air. I think he's got great athleticism to stay with receivers around the field. And at times he does make questionable play calls when the football is in the air. But like I said earlier, I feel like that's one of those things that you can clean up very well when you're transitioning to the NFL. He's not a complete island, but I feel like with a bit more training, he can definitely get there for sure. He's already a menace to opposing quarterbacks trying to complete passes in his area, just being able to disrupt and get his hand in between, the ball and the receiver's hands. And if he fixes up some of those game time decisions, I feel like he can account for a lot more turnovers in a football game. He's a guy that teams can clearly take just because of the tangibles and the athleticism that he already has in his game. And like I said, I wouldn't be surprised to see his game or see his name climb up draft boards as we get closer to draft, just because I think he's one of those guys that's just going to keep rising and rising and rising as the weeks go on. And last but certainly not least in this draft class, at least for long, I think, Travius Hodges Tomlinson, we're going to call him THT for short, from the TCU Horned Frogs. He stands at 5'9", 177 pounds, and he's another cornerback I have on this list that I can see climbing up our draft boards, and for a very good reason, and here's why. He's a mirror with wide receivers that you put in front of him, and I mean, he can shut down an entire receiver's evening while he's covering him. He's extremely handsy when jamming up receivers at the line of scrimmage, showing great man coverage and press techniques. The only thing holding, THT back from playing outside corner in the league is going to be his size at 5'9". While he might have some serious athleticism, quick feet, I feel like he's going to be another player that's going to benefit immensely switching over to the slot or nickel position. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I just feel like when you have guys that are 6'1" to 6'4", they're obviously going to have a distinct height advantage over THT, but that's not to say that he can't play, because he can definitely break them down and still tackle them. He can definitely break up passes, but they're going to get their game off. I'm going to be honest. As I mentioned before, like I said, there's nothing wrong with sliding into the slot or nickel position, especially with the new ways that defensive coordinators have been utilizing that specific position. THT can be an absolute beast in the NFL if he is a full-time slot, and we'll just have to see what happens with him as the time goes on. Like I said, I think he's going to be one of those guys that really rises up draft boards because I really do like his game. I feel like other coaches are going to like his game as well. We'll just have to see, how they take his height into accountability. I don't think that slows down his game. I don't think that hurts his game whatsoever, but it's definitely going to be an advantage for some of those bigger body wide receivers. Nonetheless, that is going to be all from me for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed my early top 10 cornerbacks for this year's NFL draft. If you think anybody's missing, if you think anybody's too low or too high, let me know in the comments below. Let me know on Instagram. Let me know on Twitter. I love talking with you guys. Just let me know. I will see you guys next time, all right? Peace.